Hi everybody, welcome back to what I hope is the last episode, part 15 of our border Lancaster build. This is the 132 scale kit, originally moulded and was to be produced by Wingnut Wings a few years ago. And the last big job I've got on the model is to build the exposed engine. I'm going to expose the starboard inner. And this is one of the 4 sprues that Border provide. You could actually expose all 4 engines, but I wanted to capture the shape of the engine nacelles on the Lancaster, at least on 3 of them. But it seemed a shame to waste the opportunity to build one with an engine exposed. So here we go with that. Now you'll notice straight away that the cylinders here, we get, this is for one engine by the way, we get an alternative set of cylinders, and that's because Border give us the option of building a BIII in the kit, which was a Rolls-Royce engined aircraft, usually the early ones, and also the Packard engine B3. So that's why we've got apparently 2 sets of engine cylinders on this sprue. Ours, our 5868, was a very early Lancaster. In fact, it was originally going to be built as a Manchester and was later rerouted onto the Lancaster production line. So ours is a Rolls-Royce engined aircraft, so we just need to be careful of that, get the right pieces off. The other thing that we need to be careful of was that there were slight differences between the inner and outer engines in terms of some of the ancillary parts that were attached to the engines. So we just need to be on our guard to make sure that we get the parts right for our inner starboard engine. So let's get some cutting out done. Straight away I'll get the cylinders sorted out so that I don't get them mixed up. The rest of the aircraft is actually just about finished, and I'll just sum up at the end of the video what I've done just to finish those last bits and pieces off. You remember in part 14 most of that was about getting the aircraft painted. The cylinder heads unfortunately are missing the Rolls-Royce logos, presumably for licensing reasons, and I don't have anything to replace those, and as I'm building the model out of the box we're just going to have to live with that slight omission, I suppose. The parts are keyed, so it's difficult to get them mixed up. It's a good thing. Now you'll notice that I don't use these God hand cutters to remove the parts from the sprue. And the reason for that is that they're quite delicate tools, and sometimes the sprue gates are a bit thick for them. And I've had another pair of these which actually chipped the edge, or chipped the end off the jaw. I think that's quite a common problem, and I think actually the manufacturer warns you not to cut near the edge because of the fragility of the tool. The upside to them is that they're really sharp, so I just use them for trimming off the little nubs on the parts once I've cut them off the sprue, and for those I just use these really old pair of Tamiya cutters just to do the hard work and then the fine work with the God hand. The first pair I had was replaced by the retailer free of charge actually, which was good of them. And I've absolutely no idea how I broke them. I just picked them up one day and they wouldn't cut, and when I looked hard the tip of one of the jaws was missing. It's not an uncommon thing. I've heard other people report that they've had the same problem with them. So if you've got a pair of those, be extremely careful with them. The border instructions are not the easiest to read for these small ancillary parts around the engine. You've got to really concentrate on where they're going. This part, which is the ignition harness, is a little bit tricky because it has to sort of get in between these two parts on the side, which are the magnetos, and in retrospect they might have been better going on once this harness was in place. But it's in with a bit of a struggle. So here again we've got some alternative parts for the Packard engine. It's the back of the supercharger. Again, this part that I'm fitting now is specific to the Rolls-Royce engine. Alright, that's the basic engine done. I'll give that a coat of black primer just to start the painting process off. But before I do that, I just want to get the rest of the engine installation done with the mounts and radiator, things like that. One thing I am concerned about, and I'm going to check it, is to make sure that these bearers will fit into the engine bay bulkhead that are fitted a long time ago on the build. The dummy engines didn't fit, so I've got reason to be suspicious really about these, and I'd rather know before painting them if we're going to have to do any modifications to get them to fit. There's a bit of flash on these parts which need to be cleaned up, and it's a bit of a surprise is that, because the kit is not that old really, the moulds are not old, and this was a very early edition of the kit, so just come off the production line if you like. And it's not bad, it's just a bit of a surprise for a kit of this age. The moulding on this engine bearer is really fine, and we'll do a bit of work with that, with a bit of dry brushing, weathering wash, just to pop out all that lovely detail. Okay, so I've just checked that over on the starboard wing, and I'm pleased to report that the fit is good, so no messing about with having to alter these bearers. So the parts for the radiator, I think it was combined with the oil cooler, I'm not sure. Seems to be a lot of parts here for one radiator, but see how it goes together. All the others on the other three engines were dummy parts, not the full radiator shell. Okay, so I think that's about as much as I can do in terms of assembly for the moment. So I'll get some paint on these parts, and what I want to do then is get some detail popped out of these engine bearers particularly. Probably also do a bit of dry brushing on the engine just to weather that a little bit as well. So I'll get these over to get them painted and come back when that's done. Just a little bit of dry brushing on the engine. This has just been painted in primer actually. It's Mr. Surfacer 1500 black. Gives a nice metallic kind of sheen to the engine. And this is just a bit of German grey, Tamiya German grey, just to bring out all that lovely detail. The Moulding of this engine and all the components is on a par with resin really. It's difficult to see how a resin part could be that much better. The level of detail for plastic is absolutely incredible. So we do need this step just to do all that lovely detail justice. I've also added some dry brushing to the engine mounts. That's using Tamiya IGA Grey. It's a nice complement to interior green and just does enough to pop that detail out as well, so they're ready to go. This is Tamiya Lacquer Gloss Aluminium. Okay, that'll do. You don't want to go overboard with this. It's tempting just to add splotches of silver and black all over the place. Keep it simple. Okay, so I'll just give the engine an overall wash just to make it a little bit more grimy. This is an AK Interactive enamel wash, which is designed to replicate grease on bearings and so on. It gives a nice weathered effect. First job, get the bearers on. There's a little bit of flexibility with these, but they actually form a V shape at the back. Tamiya brown panel liner goes really well over aluminium. This is Tamiya gloss aluminium. Now, one thing to notice is that the border instructions fail to tell you to fit this part, which is another brace for the back of the engine mount. Just fits in like that. It's on the engine sprue, but no mention of it in the instructions. It's not the first time that Border have got the instructions around this bulkhead wrong. But there it is. It just fits in between the two lower legs. Now I've tested the engine into the bulkhead, and these two pins are a bit too long, so it just obstructs the fit a little bit. So I've just trimmed them off a fraction and just see if that gives us a better fit, that the just to make sure that the engine mount will go all the way in. Now the engine's going to need a little bit of adjustment, because what we want to make sure of is that it's in line with the outer nacelle. It'd be quite easy to get this slightly incorrectly adjusted so that it's got a nose up or a nose down sort of attitude. It needs to be perfectly in line. Okay, so that's in, and actually I'm not going to use any glue. The mounts are tight enough just to hold it in position. Now I am going to add a little bit of wiring to this. There are some moulded holes in the bulkhead to accept the wire, so we can do that, and I'm not really interested in getting them lined up precisely with the locations on the engine. It'll just look busy enough to occupy the space behind the engine. So here I've got some 0.3mm lead wire. Using lead because it's nice and flexible. So here I'm just pairing the exhausts up so that I can weather them, and pairing them up means that you get the same finish on both sides of the engine. So what I'm doing is applying quite a bit of heavy weathering to the aft cylinders, and gradually they'll be fairly pure metal when we get to the front, and that's just to replicate the deposits landing on the rearmost bank of exhausts. Now, one thing you might notice at this point is that I've not fitted the shroud between the individual exhausts and the engine, and it's just because I missed it in the instructions. It's as simple as that. I didn't pay enough attention. So what I had to do was remove each of these parts, fit the shroud and refit all the individual exhausts. So it's just one of those cases where I didn't pay close enough attention to the instructions and it caused me work. But you'll see at the end of the video that there are a couple of photographs of the completed engine as it is now, with the shrouds properly located. So just be careful of that if you're building the model. Make sure you don't make the same mistake as I did. So that's the engines completed, and with that it's the last major piece of construction on the kit. We've got the propellers to build. Obviously they're a simple 3-part affair, so they just need quick assembly and painting. Get on with that. But the last thing I want to do is go through the final detail parts on the model. And it's here where you need really good references to get those details correct. So this is a really famous airframe, which is actually now resides in the RAF Museum at Hendon. So a very famous aeroplane, and it was really well documented, which is one of the reasons why I chose the option. So we're going to use a few photographs here just to illustrate those details, and it's mainly around things like the aerial fit, some of the special equipment, the antennas, and some of the changes that were made to those pieces of equipment over time. Obviously, after the number of missions that the aircraft carried out, there were lots of upgrades made, so the aircraft was substantially different at the end of the war to how it started out when it was first built. So let's look at those photographs and see how we managed to finish the model off. And we'll also finish the build off and round off with a few overall photographs of the final build. So to start off with, we've got the position of the IFF aerials. This is the early fit position from the leading edge of the fin on both sides to a position just behind the mid-upper turret fairing. Later on this was moved further down the fuselage. Here we've got the G whip aerial on the rear of the cockpit canopy, and this connected to the G set, which was just to the right of the navigator's position. It's a navigational aid. And here is the radio antenna, or one of them. There's one either side from the inside of the fin, leading all the way through to the canopy frame, just above the pilot and flight engineer on either side. You can also see one of the insulators that's provided in the kit. This little device is part of the drift indicator mechanism or equipment, and it allowed the navigator to view the ground through basically a 90-degree prism to calculate the drift angle and also the relative ground speed of the aircraft. So on the previous photograph you saw the redundant TR9 aerial inlet and also the port side one here. They were both replaced with the TR1196 whip aerial that you can see on this photograph. Here we've got the early position trailing aerial, and this was moved forward on later models to the port side forward fuselage. This is the Lorenz beam approach system. It was essentially a blind landing system developed ironically by Germany prior to the Second World War. Subsequently replaced by the Rebecca system, and you can see on later Lancasters the two Rebecca aerials on either side of the nose turret. This is the moniker tail warning radar, which was initially designed to warn the crew of aircraft approaching from behind, but it was phased out when German radar started to use the moniker signals to home in on the bomber, so it was phased out in mid-1944. Finally, we have the pitot tube here. Later aircraft had this repositioned further aft, just under the canopy on the port side. So I'm going to leave you with some overall photographs of the model now it's finished. And just a final thought really about the kit. It's one of those that I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to build. But given some of the difficulties with the production of the kit that I've mentioned throughout the series, I think it's one that I certainly wouldn't build again. And I would be cautious about recommending it to other people. The other big drawback of the model is its sheer size when it's finished. I certainly would not find space to display it properly, and thankfully this model's going to a very good home, to a great collector who I know will look after it and will display it in a sealed cabinet. So the work building it won't go to waste, which is something that I'm pleased about. So hopefully the build series has been helpful to those of you that have decided to tackle the kit or are thinking about it. Hopefully the series has given you a heads up about some of the potential pitfalls of the border production of the kit. It's a great shame that Wingnut Wings didn't manage to finish the job. I think they would have made a much better job of it than Border did. So I'll leave it there, everybody, and thanks for watching through the 15 episodes. And we'll be moving on in the next couple of weeks with a brand new build on the channel. So hopefully you'll be able to join me for that, and I'll see you soon. In the meantime, look after yourselves. Bye for now, everybody.